For over 2,000 years, there's been this epic philosophical battle, and it all started between a teacher and his most brilliant student. So let's dive into one of the greatest intellectual showdowns of all time. And the question they were fighting over is this: is art just a dangerous illusion? Something that pulls us away from what's real? Or is it like a special kind of mirror, one that shows us the deepest truths about who we are? And believe me, this isn't just some ancient, dusty debate. It literally shapes how we think about everything, from the movies we watch to the feeds we scroll through every single day.
So, let's meet our contenders. In one corner, you've got Plato, the master philosopher. He's the guy who argued for a perfect, ideal world that's ruled by pure reason. And in the other corner, his own student, Aristotle, a man who was way more grounded in the practical, messy reality of the world we can actually see and touch. The fact that these two were so close is what makes their disagreement about art so fascinating. Okay, let's start with Plato's case against art. And he wasn't just a mild critic either. Plato thought art was so dangerous that in his perfect society, the Republic, he wanted most artists banned. So why? Why would he take such an incredibly extreme position?
Well, for Plato, it all comes down to how far you are from the truth. He saw reality as a series of steps away from a perfect heavenly ideal. And in his mind, art wasn't just a step away, it was a massive leap in the wrong direction. It wasn't just a copy, it was a copy of a copy.
Let's break it down using his famous example. So first, you have the ideal form of a bed. Think of it as the perfect, divine concept of bedness. Then a carpenter comes along and builds a physical bed. That's just one copy of the perfect ideal. But then a painter creates a picture of that bed. See? That painting is a copy of the truth. It's nothing more than a shadow of a shadow. And this brings us to something Plato was obsessed with: utility. How useful is a thing? A carpenter's bed, totally useful. You can sleep on it, it has a real purpose. But a painter's bed, well, you can't really rest your head on a painting, can you? So in Plato's super logical world, that makes it fundamentally useless and pretty low value.
So Plato's list of charges against artists, especially poets, gets pretty severe. He calls them liars because they write about war without ever being a general, or about medicine without being a doctor. He accuses them of appealing to our most basic emotions, not our logic. And worst of all, by showing gods and heroes with flaws, he thinks they're terrible role models for society.
And this right here is the heart of his fear. Plato believed that a perfect society needed citizens who were disciplined and rational. He genuinely worried that if you cried at a sad play, you were basically practicing to be weak in real life. He saw art as this dangerous force that makes us all unstable and ruled by our feelings instead of our reason. But as you can imagine, Plato's own student had a completely different take. So let's pivot to Aristotle's defense. You're about to see him build a powerful counterargument, defending art not as some lie, but as a totally essential part of being human.
Aristotle starts by flipping the whole central idea on its head. Remember how Plato called imitation, or mimesis, a dangerous illusion? Well, Aristotle points out something really simple and profound. Imitation is how we learn. Think about it. As kids, we learn everything by copying. It's a natural, joyful instinct. It's our very first step toward knowing anything at all.
And what about Plato's fear of emotion? Aristotle had a brilliant answer for that too, with a single word: catharsis. He argued that watching a tragic play wasn't practice for weakness. It was a kind of emotional therapy. It's a safe place for us to experience big feelings like pity and fear, and by doing so, we purge them. We walk out feeling cleansed and mentally lighter.
Now, while Plato demanded perfect, flawless heroes to be our role models, Aristotle saw huge value in their mistakes. He argued, look, we can't really relate to a perfect character, but when we watch a great person fall because of a single tragic flaw, what he called hamartia, that teaches us a powerful lesson about humility and being careful in our own lives. The flawed hero is actually a much better teacher.
Remember how Plato claimed poets were just possessed by some divine madness, acting like empty vessels for spirits without any real knowledge? Yeah, Aristotle completely rejected that. He saw poetry as an act of pure genius. It requires a highly rational, organized mind to create a believable story with a logical plot. For him, a good poet was an expert, not some out-of-control madman.
And here it is. This is Aristotle's knockout blow. Plato said art was just a shadow of reality, but Aristotle says it's actually more profound than reality. See, history just gives you the facts. It tells you what happened to one person at one time. But poetry, poetry gives us universal truths. It tells us what might happen to anyone at any time. In that way, it's actually more philosophical.
So, okay, a 2,400-year-old argument between two long-dead philosophers. Why on earth does any of this matter to us today, in a world that they couldn't possibly have imagined?
Because when you boil it all down, this was never just about art. It's a debate about how we understand the world. Do we find truth through pure, abstract logic and reason, the way Plato believed? Or do we find it by studying the messy, emotional, imperfect world that's right here in front of us, the way Aristotle did?
And this is where the debate becomes shockingly modern. Just imagine asking Plato what he thinks about Instagram or TikTok. His answer would be, well, chillingly relevant. He'd call it a modern version of his cave of shadows, a digital world filled with illusions and copies of copies, all designed to distract us from deep thinking and the search for what's actually real.
Which brings us right back to you. In our world of social media influencers, AI-generated art, and deepfakes that are blurring the very line between what's real and what's imitation, who do you think was closer to the truth? Was it Plato, who warned us about the dangerous power of shadows? Or was it Aristotle, who believed that those very same shadows could lead us to something profound? The debate, it seems, is nowhere near over.